You want to be able to do photos, and you want to be able to do artwork and things like this, but you can't seem to get it just quite right on a laser. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, is doing photos on your laser. And this is a seems to be a big problem with lots of people that watch the channel, and I get lots of emails and messages about how you can't get photos to come out right. Well, photos is an art form on a laser, and unless you completely understand how a photograph works, you're just not going to get it to work. So you have to understand how the photo works, and you may even have to do a little bit of work in a photo editing program to even out the colors of the black and white. And remember now that we're only working with black and white, shades of gray on a laser. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not an expert on photos. We are not going to get into all of the finer aspects and technology of a laser engraver, dot size, dialing in your laser, all that kind of stuff. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I do photos, and you can go from there. So this is not going to be a video on how the laser works and how the scan works and everything else. It's just going to be a video on how I do photographs, and maybe you can do the same. And let me tell you, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, really. So lots of people like to call me an expert. I'm not an expert on any of this. All I do is share with you the things that I do. So this is my hobby, and I'm sharing it with you. Excuse me. And I am not an expert on any of this. If I'm an expert on anything, it is making mistakes, and that's about it. Making mistakes, and I'm definitely an expert on losing things. I'm an expert misplacer. So those are the only two places where I will tell you that I am an expert. Other than that, let me share with you today how I do photographs, and maybe you can make that repeatable. So let's go. All right, so let's go jump over real quick to ImageR, and I want to show you how most people do it in ImageR or some other software program. And then we're going to come back to Lightburn, and I'm going to show you how to get the same results or better with Lightburn, and have presets so that you can replicate those results for future products. All right, so we're going to start here at ImageR, and this is a place where lots of people start. And if you come to imag-r.com, you'll be presented with this website. Here are all the instructions for using it step by step. You're going to start here with upload. We're going to upload. We're going to pick the veil of Veronica, and we're going to come down here, and you're going to see that our current size is over 3,000 by 4,000. So in this program, not in Lightburn, but in this program, we're going to have to resize this, or else we'll get an error message. So we'll hit resize, and we're going to come into inches, and we're going to say 11 inches. It's about what the one that I have in Lightburn is. So 11 by 9, that's good. We'll say OK to that. Now we have a resized image, and the advanced panel has popped up over here. What we're going to do is adjust this image for a laser. So most people are going to switch right over here, and they're going to go to material. And they're going to pick, well, we're going to be using wood, so they're going to pick wood and say OK. And what you're going to get is you're going to get a version that you can use on wood, and actually is probably pretty good. Now, the difference between this software is that you're just going to get what I think is an Atkinson mode, it looks like. You're just going to get that one mode, and that's pretty much the only mode you can use, whereas in Lightburn you have several modes to choose from. So let's go ahead and say that you're an advanced user, for instance. You might come over to the gamma adjustment and you might raise that a little bit. And you might come over to the contrast and you may raise that a little bit, and you see how it's looking better. And you might come over to the brightness and maybe raise that a little bit, and the sharpness, maybe you would do a 40% sharpness adjustment on it. And here now we can see that if we zoom in up here, we've got a much better image. Not what I'm looking for, but it's pretty decent, and you can download this now and burn it, and lots of people have lots of success with this. But you would have to, if you wanted to test this burn, you'd have to either leave this window open, or maybe you're going to want to test it the next day or whatever. Whatever the case may be, you'd have to write down all of these numbers that you just did in order to adjust them further should the burn not be what you want. So you need to have like a notebook where you write all of this stuff down, and then you burn it and you test it. You see if it works. If it doesn't work, you come back and you do a little more gamma adjustment. You do a little more contrast adjustment, but you would need to know all of these numbers that you've done before. Well, let's jump over into Lightburn and let's do the same thing. So now I have got the resized image here in my art library, and this is the size that I want. If you look up here, it's 9 by 11 or so. So this is the original image that we started with in ImageR. Now if we select it, it must be selected, to right click on it, and then we go down here to adjust image. Lightburn has a completely separate program already built in that is very similar to ImageR with a couple of really nice advancements. So let's make this larger so that you can see it better. And over here you have a section called presets. Okay, now I have some presets in here, and I have several different computers with several different presets. We're going to choose the one that says Veronica, which is one that I've already done. So now you can see we have Veronica, and I want you to take a look at the difference between the two. So there is the ImageR, and here is the Lightburn. Completely different images. And now I can still do everything I can do in ImageR. I can do contrast, brightness, gamma, but I can also do other things in here. So you see, when I selected the preset of Veronica, I have a 400 DPI, which gives me a line interval that's smaller than the dot size on my laser, which is 0.08. This gives us a 0.064. And the reason why I want to do that is because I'm going to defocus the laser and I want it to be smooth. I want to apply smoothing to the photograph. And you're not going to get that kind of adjustment in any other program. This is an actual image program. And over here you'll see that I have enhanced it. And if I put this back to the way it was originally imported, which is going to be zeros on all of these. So let's just go back to zeros on all of these. No, the gamma was not 0. Yeah, the gamma is 1. So there is the original image that we're working with. Now in ImageR and in here, you'll have to adjust this to get this to where you think it would look nice on a laser. There are all kinds of adjustments that you have to do in here. And when you do this, then you have to test it on the laser. And I've got presets already that I've got done that do this automatically because I've done a whole bunch of testing. So if I come to the preset over here and I choose Veronica, you'll see that this is how I want this image to burn. And I've gone through some testing and I found that these numbers here are the right numbers for me to get an optimal burn on my laser. Now I do also have another preset on the other shop for the same image that I tried a different way, and I've done them 2 different ways. The beauty of this is that over here next to the save icon, First off, you can save it and you can use it again in the future. If you don't want to work with this again for a week or two, it'll still be here. And you can also export it. So you could export it to a flash drive if you needed to take it on the go, bring it to work and work on it at work, or you can come over here and import it and import this preset. So for instance, I'll be making this preset available for you to download, and you can pull this in and you can drop a piece of plywood on your laser, and if you have a 10-watt laser, you can use all of my settings and probably get something very similar to what I have. That's the beauty of this: export, import, and over here, modes. And this is the most important thing right here, is that we're not depending on one particular, and I think it's threshold that ImageR uses. We're not depending on one particular mode. We have several modes in here that we can change. And whenever I change modes, I always zoom in on the image first. The part that I want to see the most, which is this, and you can see original photo here, laser ready photo here. Okay, so if we were to choose threshold, you could see what would happen in threshold, and that would actually look pretty good. If you were to choose ordered, you'd see what would happen in ordered. And you could zoom out a little bit if you want to get more detail. We could also choose Atkinson, which is one of my favorites. We could choose dither, which is another favorite. Actually, all of these work very well. We could use Stucky. So if we go to Stucky, and we can go to Jarvis, we can go to newsprint, which probably wouldn't look very good on this. We can go to halftone, which wouldn't look good either. It's very close to newsprint. Sketch, and sketch sometimes does look really good. If you want it to look like a pencil drawing, for instance, you would just need to make some adjustments there. And then you can go to the Big Daddy Grayscale, and Grayscale is probably one of the finest modes that you can use, because it's not dot on, dot off. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If we were to zoom into some of this change right here, zoom way in, there you see the different shades of gray. Let's find a good spot. So here we go. So it's not just on, off, it's on. So it's on high power, on medium power, on low power, off over here, on low power, on medium power, and so on and so on and so on. And as it gets way over here, it turns a little more to on, off. But if we switch to something like Atkinson, you'll see that it's just on, off. You see the difference there? So, and in fact, most of the other modes are going to be just on, off. You see? So now, even though we get a very similar result with the shading, the difference between Grayscale and the others is much deeper shading. And you may think that this would be much better, and it would be much better if you were going to print this, but we're not printing it. We're laser engraving it. So yeah, that would look better, but you'd probably need to be in perfect focus, and that's pretty hard to get. So if we jump over to Atkinson, you'll see this is much more achievable, because we just have pretty much on, off, and certain places have more clusters than others, which creates the illusion of shadowing and more power, and the laser understands this better. We're going to stick with the Atkinson mode, and we're going to go and we're going to use this preset that I've got here. And I'm also going to show you the difference in focusing, what happens when you defocus, which is what you have to do when you do images. We're going to defocus this image. We're going to first run it regularly, perfectly focused. Then we're going to defocus a millimeter, defocus 2 millimeters, and you'll see that my final result on the diode laser is going to be about 4 millimeters of defocus to get the perfect result at a very high DPI. Let's go ahead and say OK to this in the bottom now that we've processed it. And there is what we get on the screen. So we'll say OK to that. And we're ready to actually burn this. So let's go do some testing and see how this comes out. All right, moving on now. Let me show you how I got to this point of getting this image, which, by the way, sells for an obscenely large amount of money. But let me show you how I got this image from a photograph that was taken online from the National Gallery of Art. And for all you copyright people out there, don't worry about it because it is not copywritten. It's too old for that. So let me show you how we got the image to this. And there's one key you'll never hear anyone talk about, and that is focus. Yeah, the only thing you're going to ever hear is you have to have a perfect focus. And I say that all the time. And that's true if you're doing artwork graphics, if you're doing vector graphics, raster graphics, whatever. But if you're doing actual art, focus and defocusing or raising the laser head so that it is out of focus is extremely important. So here is the original photograph. And now what I do is I scale these down to a manageable size, about 2 or 3 inches at the most. This one I think was about 2 inches tall. And this is totally in focus. And you can see that it's not a great image. Then I defocused it by 1 millimeter. And then I defocused it by 2 millimeters. That got much, much better. Defocused at 2 millimeters. And I knew that 3 millimeters wasn't going to make a big difference because I'm going to go to my max range, and this is on the Lasermatic 10, and the max range on that is defocusing by 4 millimeters. So I went all the way up to 4, and that is the result I got right there at 4 millimeters. And that is perfect. So now on your CO2 lasers, you're going to do things a little bit differently. You might want to order a 4-inch barrel for the laser, and you might want to order a meniscus lens and drop that right on top of your convex lens, and then put that barrel into your CO2 and run it defocused, do these defocusing tests with your CO2. You're not going to achieve this with a regular convex lens on the CO2. But if you use a combo lens and you drop a meniscus lens right on top and then just put that 4-inch barrel in there, and you'll get some really, really nice results. In fact, probably just as good or better than on the diode laser itself. That is the key, and this is the trick, is, and you'll hear me say it all the time, running your tests. Defocusing, what I call defocusing, and look folks, I have my own terminology here, so this is defocused, or I've raised the focus on the laser module by 4 millimeters, and that is how I came up with the perfect burn. I've also increased the LPI on this as well to 400. Increased LPI, running it out of focus, are the two keys to getting this type of quality out of a photograph. Now, I understand that this is not technically a photograph. It is an oil painting, but it is a photograph of an oil painting. So pretty much the same thing. You've seen me do my other photographs in the past. The most famous one is probably the Legends of the Blues, and I always do those out of focus as well. There you go. That is the trick to getting a perfect, really nice replica of a photograph onto a piece of wood or any material that you might be using. All right, so really quickly, starting with the right photograph is what makes actual photos burn well on wood, slate, or whatever it is, whatever material it is that you're going to burn the photograph. So taking a look at this photograph, you may say, wow, that is a great photograph of your dog. But fact of the matter is, it isn't, because we have all of these different lighting effects around here. Now, this is not a photo tutorial in any way, shape, or form, but I just wanted to show you how I would begin with something like this, and you would have to learn your own photo software, whatever it might be that you use. So the first thing that I would do is I would come in here and I would remove the color and turn it into a black and white photo. And then I would probably feather that photo out because you don't want the hard edges. So I would do something like that. Now, the problem that we have here is that the nose, the eyes, and the mouth are too dark to import this into Lightburn. So every software program is going to have a masking tool. So we'll grab a masking tool here, and I'll just show you very quickly and simply. And most photo software is going to be about the same. We're just going to do the nose here, and there is the nose. So now I'll select that, and I'll come up here, and I will come to the brightness and raise the brightness on that nose, just so that it matches the rest of the photo. And then I'll probably feather that a little bit as well, so it's not such a sharp contrast between the two. And now you can see we have more detail in the nose that's more similar to the rest of the photograph. And then of course I would take this masking tool and I would come around and I would do these other dark areas as well. So I would come in here and do these dark areas, and then I would also look at the fur, and maybe this part is darker or too dark. I might mask this out separately and change that. But the first thing I would do is the mouth, then I would do the eyes, and so on. And this is how you need to actually become an artist with a photograph. And you can clearly see now the nose. Lightburn is going to interpret this completely differently. Let's just undo this back to the beginning. There is the original photograph with just a mask on it, and there is with the masking effects. So you can see that all of these little details in here are now going to come out, whereas before it's just going to be a dark black burn. So that is just this is not a tutorial, like I said, and you'll have to learn your own photo editing software in order to become proficient at this. But you would want to mask out, make all of the black areas a similar color so that Lightburn interprets it in a similar way. And that's about it. So to recap, you want to first, you want to start with a good photograph. And if you don't have photo editing software, you might want to get some. And you might want to learn that, because if you're going to do photographs in Lightburn, you're going to need to do some touch-up work in your photo editing software. And that's not always the case. You may get a perfect picture and it may import perfectly into Lightburn, and you may be able to just drop it on, do some testing, defocus, and run off the perfect photograph. But the chances of that are pretty slim. I can tell you that, I do a lot of these, or I used to do a lot of these pet cemetery monuments, the tombstones for pets. And you're always going to get a photograph that's just not going to work. I mean, 100% of the time, the customer is going to give you a photograph that's not going to work because it's their favorite photograph and it wasn't taken by a photographer. So if you're going to do photographs, you are going to need to have some photo editing software, and you're going to need to know how to use that software. So it's very important that you try and, first off, you make it black and white. Try and make it as uniform as possible, the blacks and the whites. You don't want too dark of a black anywhere where you can't see the details, and you don't want it too light anywhere as well. So getting to learn the masking tools is sort of an art in itself. And I can tell you that you can probably buy any software on the market and go on YouTube and get some masking tutorials and learn how to mask like a pro in a matter of a couple of hours, really. Masking is not a really hard thing to do. What I showed you in the quickie example was a quickie example. What I do is I zoom all the way in and I mask it very detailed. I use the same masking tool. I just make it much smaller, and I just do the edges real detailed, and then I go ahead and make the adjustments, and I feather that region out a little bit so that you can't see the hard line where the brightness or where the gamma or the contrast or any of that changes. And make sure that you're going to start with a black and white photograph so you know what you're working with anyway. But that's it, folks. That's the whole trick to doing all of this photograph work, is by number one, starting with the right photograph, number two, making sure that you mask out everything and get it balanced, number three, making sure that you run your tests on defocusing, and number four, enjoying the profits. Anyway, I hope this video has helped you today, and maybe you've learned more about how to do photographs. Maybe you haven't. I don't know. This is the way that I do them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. And as always, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.